This
Everyone. And
conference will
oh,
now be recorded.
all right. Good
Sorry,
evening,
go ahead.
everyone. That's okay. That's all right. I hope everyone had a really great holiday. As you know me, I'm Kristen McGill. I'm a dietitian and member of the Healthy Living team at Giant. I'm really excited to start talking about mood boosting foods because we're pretty much right smack dab in the middle of winter. And some people experience that seasonal affective disorder. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But it is no wonder that during the winter, they call it the winter blues because our moods are altered. And it's interesting to know that there are certain foods that can help elevate or make us feel a little bit better. Nothing's a guarantee, but it is kind of cool to see the connection between our food choices and our mood. So let me talk about that here. For today's agenda, we break it down into 3 sections. We have in the office, which is not the literal office. This is really just understanding our moods or those mood influencers. Then we're going to head to the aisles. We'll talk about foods that can actually support better moods, but I'm also going to share some additional resources that Giant has, in particular, the Savory online database. That's one of my favorite things to use. And then lastly, in the kitchen, how can we prep? How can we meal plan? How can we stay inspired? All of that good stuff. I have some really good recipe ideas for you here coming up. All right, so in the office, not the literal office, this is the science, the evidence behind, what's the deal with our moods and why is this a struggle for so many of us? So I like to break this down into a couple categories. First, there are some things that we cannot control. So the uncontrollable factors, well, let me go to that little slide or that little image that you see there. We kind of have a balance between our natural stress hormones. It's just going to occur, it's part of life. And then you also have those happy hormones. They're made naturally. So in a perfect world, in a perfect situation, you would have equal balance of those stress hormones and happy hormones. But as we know, life doesn't happen that way, and this balance is often offset or it's imbalanced. So the uncontrollable factors, those are going to be things that we have no control over. Look at the pandemic. I mean, we thought long ago that we would kind of see the end of it, or at least I did, and it looks like there's no end in sight. So, that's an added stressor. We've had to adapt to, all kinds of, I guess, the new norms. So that can definitely put a damper on our spirits. The other thing is that we cannot control the weather. I just mentioned that we're smack dab in the middle of winter. And so some people do experience more of a depressed or more of a sad feeling. And that's because the sun isn't shining. We're indoors. We're not getting out as much. We sometimes tend to recluse or we tend to be little hermits. So sometimes that isolation, in addition to a pandemic, is really just kind of adding insult to injury. Unfortunately, we can't control that. Now, there are some controllable factors, though. For instance, how we fill our plate and the foods that we eat. I'm definitely going to talk about that here in just a second. Our exercise, how we choose to manage our stress, that is something that we do have control over. So at the end of the day, we don't know what life is going to throw at us. So yes, we can just try to make attempts to get that balance. Balance the stress hormones with the happy hormones. All right. But speaking of hormones, you can blame them to a degree. So we know stress is part of life and it's going to happen. There are 2 major types of stress hormones that our bodies will release. We have epinephrine, otherwise known as that adrenaline, and that's released in a very, very stressful, intense situation. So hopefully nobody is experiencing a level of stress like that. But think about the time or a time where maybe you did notice your heart rate was up, your palms were sweaty, maybe you felt short of breath. That's a very, very stressful event. That hormone is suddenly released and then it subsides because hopefully that very, very stressful event also subsided too. So it's just a short-term response to stress. However, we have cortisol, which is actually released in periods of more of a low and slow, as I like to say, a slow and slow burning time of stress. So maybe there's conflict in the home, or maybe there's work pressures, or maybe there's other instances going on that, yeah, you're not having that adrenaline pumping through you, but you might be having this low level of cortisol. Cortisol is not good for us because what it does actually promotes inflammation. And so we know that there's a lot of evidence out there showing that inflammation can impact our moods. It can make us feel a little more depressed, maybe a little more sad. So cortisol is something that we definitely want to, we're not always going to be able to combat it, but there are certain foods that can actually come in and help suppress that. I will talk about which foods play that role. But those are the two different types of stress hormones. I do believe I talked about this last time, but maybe not. Sorry for the repeat. Oh, Darren, did you have something to add?
But I got an actual question.
Oh, sure, yes.
When you go back to the two different types of stress hormones, could one say that the epinephrine is released when it's more of a physical threat, whereas cortisol is more of a non, just everyday dealing with the pressures of life type of stress?
Yes. You broke up just ever so slightly. It might have
Oh,
been an audio issue on my end with the epinephrine. You would ask something about epinephrine and then you cut out for a little
yeah.
bit. Um,
Is
yeah, go ahead.
the adrenaline um, more related to actual physical threats, whereas the cortisol is more of the everyday, day-to-day life stress?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Great question. Yeah. So if you've ever heard of that fight or flight response, that's usually that where that epinephrine will come in. And I think that is really fascinating. Some people in a very, very high stress situation, they'll either fight or they will flight or they will retreat. There's actually a third one in there too. It's a freeze where some people
Freeze,
are
yeah.
so panicked. Yeah, they freeze. I know they've done that kind of testing, especially people who are frontline workers or they're in law enforcement, making sure what their fight or flight response does in times of high stress. So you're absolutely right that epinephrine, that adrenaline, is something where it's a very high stress situation, and then that cortisol is more like an everyday type of thing. So, or it's still a level of stress, but kind of like what you said, nothing too intense. Yeah, we would definitely notice a difference with, with the epinephrine where you feel like your heart's pumping, or so there's something where it's almost like your survival modes kick in. Whereas the cortisol could just be low burning. Some people, oh, I forgot to mention too, in terms of how these hormones play a role on our appetite. Epinephrine or that adrenaline, think about a very, very stressful situation. Food is probably the last thing on your mind. So it's actually going to come in and suppress the appetite. So yeah, most people, when they're very, very stressed like that, they don't want to eat food. Cortisol has kind of the opposite. It actually impacts our hunger hormones, making them more proliferated. So, people have noticed that when they're stressed, they're more inclined to eat. So, and that's that cortisol, which kind of is this low burning, you know, nuisance, I was going to say, that's kind of just floating around and just kind of wreaking havoc on our appetite, wreaking havoc on, our other hormones, our moods and stuff like that. So, great question, and yeah, I do find it really fascinating with these hormones. So, but yeah, I'll keep going. But if you have any other questions, please by all means go ahead and stop me because I like the interaction. So, okay, so that's kind of bringing me to my next slide with the stress. I talked about cortisol, how it's it's low burning. It's more of a common everyday type of occurrence. So it's no wonder people are saying, "Oh, I'm stressed. I'm so stressed. There's never any end in sight." So anyway, what cortisol does is, like I said, it actually promotes inflammation. So it's not our friend. And with that inflammation, it almost exacerbates stress even more. It exacerbates inflammation. The other thing I had mentioned is that it does play that direct role with our hunger hormones. So we talked about this last time, but we have a hunger hormone called ghrelin, which sounds like growlin when you think about it, and cortisol comes in and kind of adds to that. So there's a reason why people say, when I'm stressed, I want to eat. So it's not always in your head, although yes, chances are it is just that. It's not a physical need, it's more of an emotional need, but that makes sense because emotionally, if you're feeling stressed, then yeah, that's why a lot of people are inclined to that. And I had mentioned that with some of these foods, and I had mentioned this actually, but if you notice some of these foods, they're not very healthy. They're pretty, high in sugar and saturated fat, empty calories. So the reason for that is because some of these foods make us feel good. So it makes perfect sense. You're feeling stressed, you want some kind of reprieve from that. So yeah, it might be, you know, something where people like to go for that ice cream, or they like to go for the chips. It's that familiarity, it's that little source of comfort. But the interesting thing is that because these foods are high in saturated fat and sodium and refined sugar, it kind of repeats the cycle where now you're adding even more inflammation because those foods are pro-inflammatory, in addition to that cortisol in addition to that low burning stress. So it is kind of like this snowball effect. So I don't say that to get us all down, because stress is going to happen. There's no way it's, we can avoid it. I just like to bring awareness, or just tell people to recognize that, there's a reason why we have, these desires to reach for these types of foods when we're feeling stressed, but we can always do a little bit better. In fact, we do encourage most people, don't seek food for comfort. Don't eat your feelings, try to find other healthy habits to manage your stress, which we'll talk about here in a second. All right, so when it comes to following the My Plate, or I'm sorry, the foods that help boost our food, oh, goodness, the foods that help boost our mood, I really just tell people focus on the My Plate, which we've covered in detail here. And there are certain nutrients that I'm going to talk about, as you see, that are related to our moods, that being vitamin C, tryptophan, magnesium, folate, vitamin B6, and vitamin D, and omega-3s. Some of these you probably have already heard of, some you might not have. So you don't need to stress and write these down, or, start thinking about taking supplements, because when you're following the My Plate, you're going to touch on all these nutrients as is. So that's why we tell people follow the My Plate. That's the best thing that you can do to kind of help elevate your moods, get you feeling right in time for winter. All right, so I am going to break down all those nutrients, but because we're talking about those nutrients, we're going to head to the aisles and talk about which foods have these specific nutrients and what role do they serve in terms of, making our happy hormones. All right, so if you bear with me with this slide here, I talked about vitamin C and tryptophan in that previous list. So this is sort of like a
Can I
domino effect. Oh,
can I
yes.
just stop for a second? I'm sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
Kristen. The only slide I see is the stress one.
Oh no. Darren, are you still
Is it
seeing
my
the?
computer?
It might be Shelley, because I'm on the slide that
Okay.
Christians is on. You're
Okay, I
showing
don't see
vitamin
them,
C and
so
tryptophan
no,
equals serotonin, and that's what I see.
no, I see the stress hands.
Mm.
Yeah, you're just a little delayed, Shelley.
Okay,
You may be frozen.
Yeah, do you need to, I don't know the answer. Do you need to refresh the browser or anything?
I don't
I
know.
don't know. I don't know if that helps. I'm not a techie person at all.
Me either.
Yeah. Did it transition at all
No.
since it paused? Hmm.
Yeah, you may try to refresh, Shelley.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm happy to wait, or I can keep going.
I know
Looks
you're
like,
on a hard
yeah,
schedule,
that's
Kristen,
okay.
so
All right, I'll keep going, and then if Shelly rejoins, it looks like she's a little frozen right now, so maybe she did sign off and she'll be back. So, all right, so I'll keep going. Oh, there she is again. Okay. Um, all right, so I'll just keep going, and hi again, Shelly. I hope that worked for you. Okay.
Logged in twice.
yes.
Yeah. Do you see the slide with the fruits and veggies? It says vitamin C,
Yes.
tryptophan. Oh, okay, good. All right.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, yeah, you didn't miss anything. So, all right. So let me just continue on. So if you bear with me on this slide, it is kind of like a domino effect. It's like one leads to the other, which helps the other. So vitamin C is found abundantly in fruits and veggies. And again, if you're following the My Plate, you're going to be touching on this. So a lot of those brightly colored fruits and veggies you see, like um, collard greens or dark leafy greens, bell peppers, berries, citrus, all of those are chock full in vitamin C. And vitamin C serves as a precursor to make that essential amino acid called tryptophan. So again, vitamin C comes first in order for an amino acid, tryptophan, to be made. Now, we probably heard that word around Thanksgiving, turkey, tryptophan, isn't that what makes me really tired? And it's actually not what makes you tired. Tryptophan isn't associated with making you sleepy. The reason why after Thanksgiving we feel tired is because we ate a big meal and all the blood is rushing to our stomachs for digestion. So we don't need to worry about, well, that tryptophan is going to make me tired. Yeah, I know. I used to always think it was, oh, tryptophan is making me sleepy. It's just the fact that you ate a big meal. But no, tryptophan is essential because our bodies do not naturally make it. We need dietary sources to make it for us. So tryptophan's role then is to produce serotonin. That's that happy neurotransmitter. That's what makes us feel really good. So like I said, vitamin C comes first to make that tryptophan, which is essential. We need that in our diet as is, and then therefore it's going to make serotonin. Now, some of the best sources of tryptophan in the produce department or produce section are going to be bananas, asparagus, and dates. So it's kind of interesting that bananas are a natural source, so is asparagus, so are dates. Who would have thought? I always thought it was poultry. I always thought it was turkey that made that, or that had that tryptophan. But actually, the highest sources are in some of these items here. Now, if you like them by itself, or by themselves, that's great. Some people love bananas. I happen to love asparagus, especially if it's roasted. Dates are pretty cool to have. I like them. They're called nature's candy, actually, because they're very sweet. But if you're like, I don't like any of those, or I don't know how I would incorporate them, this is where I fall into the Savory Online Database. I love this website, and maybe I'm biased because I work for Giant. But if you're ever interested in trying a new recipe or trying something that but in a new way, you can just type the word in the search engine and you'll get tons of recipe hits. So I just pulled this little example of the banana. Bananas are nothing new. We've seen them, we eat them all the time. But if you're like, well, I'm bored with my bananas, I don't know how else to enjoy them, I just go to Savory and I type in that word. And, again, banana smoothie, sometimes it gets you thinking, oh, yeah, it might be kind of nice to include that, or, oh, yeah, I eat my bananas just plain. How about I try incorporating them into a smoothie? So you'll see that that's kind of what I'm going, or where I'm going with the whole recipe inspiration utilizing the Savory Online Database. And I only say that just because I get stuck in food ruts all the time. I'm constantly searching for better recipe ideas. And so, yeah, that's why Savory Online has really kind of, met a need in my life. Okay. All right. So let me see if, it looks like there is a little bit of a delay with the transition, but we're good. So the next two nutrients, magnesium and folate, we don't hear too much about them, but they're really good for us. In fact, magnesium is one of these under-researched nutrients. It's actually a mineral. And they are finding that it's got all kinds of roles with cardiovascular health, bone health, even brain health, which is really cool. So the reason why, or the connection, research is suggesting, they haven't been able to solidify or validate it, but there's suggestive evidence that magnesium does play a direct role in combating signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression. Again, they don't know how, they don't know why, but there is a link. So for example, they might have studied individuals where they do consume a diet rich in magnesium and kind of did, one of those scales to see how their moods were feeling. And they've noticed that people who consume more magnesium rich foods actually reported better moods. So again, there's no, they haven't been able to identify it, but suggestive evidence. So if you're like, well, gee, I would like some magnesium rich foods, some of the best sources are going to come from dark leafy greens. So think about spinach and kale, mustard greens, all those good things out there. Nuts are also abundant in magnesium. I love nuts too. And then this is great news for my dark chocolate lovers, that magnesium is also found in dark chocolate. Now it has to be dark chocolate. So if you're a milk chocolate or a white chocolate lover, you're not going to get that magnesium. But dark chocolate also kind of serves a dual purpose. We were just talking about stress, and while we don't want to eat our feelings, sometimes it's nice if you can just decompress, have a piece of dark chocolate. Sometimes that takes away those afternoon cravings. Sometimes it's just all people need to kind of, it does the job. It takes away the cravings, kind of satisfies that sweet tooth. It's enjoyable enough that, yeah, it kind of feels like a little treat, but you're not going overboard. So the darker the percent cacao, the more bitter it will taste. So if you are making that full transition from milk chocolate to dark chocolate, just maybe go up incrementally, maybe start at 60% cacao, and then gradually work yourself up to it. I don't know if anyone's tried anything higher than 75%, like 80 or 85%. There's even 90. I think there's either 90 or 95% cacao. And it's very, very bitter. Some people have said that it tastes almost like you're eating a bar of coffee, like coffee grounds or something like that. So anyway, all right, so looking at folate, very similar to magnesium, that folate has also been suggested as having a role in combating signs and symptoms of depression. Some of the best sources of folate are coming from citrus, especially things like oranges, beans and legumes, great source of that, and even fortified cereals, they have folate in them too. So you can, again, if you can consume these on a regular basis, kudos. Or if you're following the My Plate, you're getting in a very well balanced, uh, a variety of foods. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry. Then more than likely you're getting enough magnesium and folate in your diet. So here's, again, recipe inspiration. I love when I can find recipes that kind of has it all. So we've got an idea here with this chicken and kale salad with almonds. So just looking at it, we talked about those dark leafy greens being a great source of magnesium. They also have some folate in it too, so they're kind of a 2-in-1 package deal. We've got those almonds, again, nuts, great source of magnesium. And then I think that was pretty much all, yeah, with that. Oh, I was going to mention, if you are vegan, vegetarian, you can obviously make this veg friendly, and you can swap that out, maybe put some other nuts, or maybe do some kind of beans or legumes to kind of get in that protein. So anyway, we've got a recipe here. It pretty much touches on getting in magnesium and getting in that folate. Next up is vitamin B6, and vitamin B6 is an essential nutrient in neurotransmitter production. So it's going to help our brains make those natural hormones that we need to make us feel good. The best sources of vitamin B6 are going to be found in pork. I know not everybody eats pork, or maybe they don't like pork, and therefore you can fall into poultry. So chicken and turkey, duck also counts as that. Again, if that's something that you don't consume, maybe you're more plant forward, veg friendly, as we like to say. Legumes are a great source of vitamin B6, such as chickpeas. Soy is a great source of vitamin B6, cottage cheese, and even fortified cereals. So if you don't find everything on this list that you enjoy, that's okay, because the good news is with vitamin B6, the recommendations, the RDA, it's not too high. RDA stands for recommended dietary allowance, by the way. So, all you need is really just, again, well-balanced diet. More than likely, following the My Plate, you're going to be getting in enough B6. All right. Oh, and by the way, I was talking about, magnesium and folate and vitamin B6. These are not common nutrient deficiencies in our country, by the way. So that's why we don't hear a whole lot about it, because again, we don't really have issues with malnutrition. Yes, people still do live in poverty here in our country, but more not like the third world countries where, yes, magnesium and folate and all that kind of stuff have been, widely deficient in the population. Actually, years ago, back in the 90s, I think early 90s, the FDA mandated that bread products like cereals and breads be fortified with folate, because women were, there was a prevalence of babies being born with neural tube defects, otherwise known as spina bifida. So that's actually helped, because they fortified that. The FDA mandated it to be found in fortified cereals and rice and breads and things like that. The rate of newborns with spina bifida has decreased by like 75%. So again, that's kind of something we don't hear much about, because it was addressed, decades earlier. So anyway, just a little fun fact. Okay, so with this recipe inspiration, looking back, I'll switch the slides in case we forgot about what foods have vitamin B6. I think for the most part, we know pork, we know poultry, we know legumes, but I was kind of curious about cottage cheese. Now, not a lot of people like cottage cheese, but here's where I actually had a little bit of fun with that Savory Online recipe database. I typed in the word cottage cheese, and I saw all the recipes that called for it. And here I stumbled across this real life lasagna. I don't know why they call it real life lasagna. Maybe because it's not coming from a package. It's not a frozen dinner. I don't know. Anyway, I had to laugh, because I was like, well, what else would it be? It's real life lasagna. Anyway, so instead of ricotta cheese, this recipe calls for cottage cheese. So I thought that was kind of cool. So for those people who don't really love cottage cheese by itself, maybe you'll enjoy it when it's kind of disguised in this pasta dish. Plus, who doesn't love a good homemade lasagna? Now, the only bone I have to pick with this image is that, we're talking about My Plate. We're talking about bringing balance. So this plate is looking a little bit empty. And you probably know where I'm going with this. There aren't a whole lot of veggies. So get creative, add some veggies to the side. Maybe you want to roast some veggies, do a bag salad, get creative. But this is the only image that they had, and there were no veggies. But remember, it's all about bringing balance. Yes, Darren.
Question.
Yeah.
Have either one of you ever tried cottage cheese in a hot dish?
Yeah, and lasagna, as a matter of fact.
Really?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
not good.
Oh, he
Okay.
didn't like it? Oh
Yeah,
no. Oh no.
no.
I tried it in one recipe. It's called $1 million spaghetti, which is really funny. It's like a casserole and it's made like spaghetti, but one of the it's kind of made like lasagna too, but one of the layers has cottage cheese. So it's a layer of meat sauce, tomato sauce, cottage cheese, and then pasta, and it's baked. And yeah, I loved it. I don't know, but yeah, I guess Shelly didn't like the whole pasta and cottage cheese. It's not
Now,
for everybody. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I just recently was craving pasta, like really, really bad, like a junkie almost. And I went and got some zucchini zoodles that were
Yeah.
already cut
Mhm.
up, and I made a pasta bake using that, using low milk or skim milk mozzarella, skim milk ricotta, just a little bit, and something else. I think it was sour cream, or it might have been sour cream, and mixed it with cheese and parsley and spinach. And so you do a layer of the sauce, you do a layer of the cheese, you do a layer of the zoodles, and then repeat it so it's like a casserole and you bake it. It was delicious.
It sounds good. And kudos to you for, making getting in those veggies, you're craving pasta. It sounds like, yeah, you're very creative with that. So awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
That
I,
recipe sounds really good.
Well,
yeah.
because pasta doesn't really like me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I have a similar issue, but the zoodles do not, they really don't take away my craving for pasta. I had to really make a conscious decision just not to eat it because I did try to go through the replacement, you know. And one of the things that I did was I stopped bringing it home in the bulk that I used to. I mean, I
Mm,
literally would buy 5 boxes of different types of, you know, uh, spaghetti type pasta, the
yep,
noodle type pasta. I always had it because I could eat pasta with just some olive oil and garlic.
yep, me
Uh,
too.
but like you,
Yep.
Shelley, yeah, it disagrees with me, you know. Uh, and I did buy several of the noodle, what they call them. I forgot what the piece of equipment is called, but several ways to take my
Oh, the
zucchini.
zoodle maker.
Yeah,
It's a zoodle maker.
and I use it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't replace my craving for pasta. Mm.
Yeah. Nothing will ever take the real place, but yeah. But I applaud both of your efforts to make better choice. I'm right there in that same boat. Pasta, little too much of it, just yeah, my stomach's not happy with me.
Yeah.
So all right. So I'm waiting for the transition. Oh, yeah. So here's
Mm.
another recipe that I came across that I thought was pretty cool. And this is going to touch on a number of nutrients. Multigrain almond bites. They're very kid friendly. It's so super easy to make. They call for multigrain Cheerios. So you're getting in the fortified cereal with that folate. Almond, we talked about rich source of magnesium. It calls for dark chocolate, dark cocoa powder, also good source of magnesium. All in all, these are pretty low fat, low calorie desserts. And like I said, they're snack friendly, they're kid friendly. So here's another, example of where we're touching on multiple nutrients in one recipe. So I think that's pretty cool. All right, next we have vitamin D, otherwise known as that sunshine vitamin. This is a common deficiency in our country. In fact, I would say most of the population is low in vitamin D. I don't know if yeah, Shelly, you're raising your hand. Yeah, I am severely low. So I don't know the exact reason, and science hasn't been able to validate it either, the direct link between why vitamin D does impact our moods. But when you think about it, think about how it's a warm summer day, you feel the sun on your skin, it feels nice, it's kind of like brings you a little bit of happiness. So obviously we're deprived of that during the winter time. So the reason why so many people are vitamin D deficient depends on a number of things. It depends first on the pigmentation, the melanin in your skin. So the darker you are, the longer sun exposure that you need. Also where we fall geographically. So the sun rays just are never as intense here in the greater DC area than they would be down in the Florida Keys. So also there's a body of evidence out there that I would not argue against that, research is saying get out of the sun. The harmful UV rays can cause cancer, oxidative stress. So we put SPF 50 on our skin. So all of that actually hinders the body's natural ability to make vitamin D from the sunlight. So it's a very tricky thing. And so that's why most people do need to supplement. There are some food sources that have some vitamin D, but sometimes that's not enough. So it's always good to get lab work checked. Like I said, most people are deficient, and some people, if you're wondering, oh, I got to take a mega dose of vitamin D, and that's just because, yeah, got to take a mega dose. Okay. So some of the sources that have actually been fortified or they're natural sources of vitamin D are going to be milk and dairy products. So calcium and vitamin D are found in milk. Also lactose-free products. So if you're lactose intolerant like me, there's lactate milk. There's also plant-based milks out there now, which the dairy section is absolutely huge now, which is kind of funny. There's something out there for everybody. So a lot of these plant-based milks have been fortified. So if you look and see that soy milk, for those who just maybe don't tolerate dairy, dairy doesn't tolerate them, or they like to be more plant-based, that's totally fine. Some of them, like you see their soy milk has been fortified with calcium and vitamin D. Tuna is also a natural source of vitamin D as well. A lot of the fatty fish, including salmon too. And if you don't mind salmon, canned salmon, especially with the bones, fresh salmon, you don't notice it as much, but it's going to have some vitamin D. But if you've ever had canned salmon and you open it, it's pretty grotesque. It startled me at first, but that's because they have the skin and the bones. Now, if you get past that visual, it's still totally fine. That bones are soft and edible enough that, yeah, it's not gonna, give you a bowel obstruction or anything like that. But I couldn't get past the visual appearance. And so, yeah, now I just go with skinless, boneless. Yeah, I was like freaked out the first time I saw canned salmon, the way it was. So anyway, but yeah. And then, like I said, there's other, I don't have orange juice represented on the slide, but some varieties of orange juice have calcium and vitamin D. So there's some companies out there trying to do the best they can to fortify. Oh, I also saw some, it was a plant-based milk. It was pea milk. PEA. There's a slide here to show you. It also has been fortified with calcium, vitamin D, as well as omega-3s, which was actually pretty cool. I was like, wow, man, they're throwing everything in this milk. All right. So some snack inspiration, meal inspiration. You can also try to incorporate some of these products that I was talking about. But this one I thought was pretty cool. Horseradish. I have a hard time saying that because I want to horseradish. Like I blur it all together. I know it's a hard word. So horseradish. It's one of those words I just.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I looked at it and I thought it was a misspelling because I was reading it as horser as opposed to just horseradish. I thought it was like, oh, they misspelled the word, but then I had to stop and look at it again.
Yeah, I think that's how it's spelled. Yes, it's
That's
spelled,
correct.
but it's pronounced different. It's so weird. Yeah, because I would say I say horseradish, which there's no H in that except for the end. So anyway, I'm kind of embarrassed, but yeah, it's just one of those. But you're right there. It does look like horseradish. Anyway, okay. So you guys know what I'm trying to say. So anyway, I thought these deviled eggs were pretty cool because you get the tuna. I also forgot to mention that egg yolks have a tiny bit of vitamin D in them. So when you're making deviled eggs, you separate the egg yolks. So you're mixing that in with the tuna. This recipe actually calls for a little bit of mayonnaise, not much. So it wasn't too terribly high in the saturated fat. So I thought that was kind of a cool idea. We're kind of in a season of entertaining, so guests might really appreciate, some deviled eggs. So anyway, I just thought that was pretty cool recipe, and I do like a little kick from the horseradish. All right, okay, that's enough of that slide. So anyway, all right, let's talk about omega-3s. These are anti-inflammatory. And what's cool about omega-3s is research has found that they have the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier in our brains, which is basically the gatekeeper. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. But they've been able to cross that and interact with the synthesis of happy neurotransmitter production, which is really cool. And I had mentioned they fight inflammation. So remember, going back a few slides when we talked about cortisol, how it's pro-inflammatory, it actually can come in and actually suppress or basically mitigate pro-inflammatory agents such as cortisol in our body. So more omega-3s, always good for us. And it's not a very common deficiency. So again, getting in lots of balance, more than likely you're getting in enough omega-3s. But tuna and salmon, so they have a dual purpose. They're rich in those heart healthy fats, those omega-3s. They're also rich in vitamin D, so that's good. So I just put that little tuna creation there. Walnuts, so if you're not a seafood person, or again, you're trying to be more plant forward, those are also a rich source of omega-3s, also flax seeds, chia seeds. And then here's that Ripple pea milk that I was telling you about. It's plant-based, but it's got an astounding amount of protein for coming from a legume. In fact, it has the exact same amount of protein in a serving as regular cow's milk. So you're getting in just as much nutrient, just as much protein, and I would even say that you're getting in more because they've added omega-3s to their product. Now, some varieties of regular cow's milk have also added omega-3s. I think there's something called, I think it's milk that's called Horizon milk. It comes in a red box, red-ish container. I think they fortify their milk with omega-3s, but anyway, I put that try something new there because, we've been talking about a lot of products, we've been talking about a lot of recipes. So, maybe this is inspiring you to try something new. With this next slide, here's just another example. We were just talking about these zucchini noodles, the spiralized noodles. So yes, they do not take the place of regular pasta, but I do appreciate how, yeah, it does make it a little bit easier to get more plants or more produce on your plate. This is a nice summertime meal. I will say I probably should update this for winter. But fire up the grill, you put some salmon burgers on there, a whole wheat bun, you get some veggies there. That's exactly how you would follow the My Plate. So anyway, I do appreciate the fact that, yeah, it's pretty easy to touch on these nutrients, or pretty fun to try and do recipe just with some of the nutrients and even the products that we were talking about today. Lastly, I have a dessert idea for you. Going way back to the beginning of our presentation with the dates, those were rich in that tryptophan, which helps make serotonin. Well, vitamins, well, yeah, sorry. Yes, they're rich in tryptophan, which helps make that neurotransmitter, serotonin, goodness, sorry. And then walnuts are called in this recipe. We talked about walnuts, great source of those omega-3s. So I actually happen to love dates. So these date and walnut truffles are really easy to make. You throw them in a food processor if you have one, or you can throw them in like one of those pulsers or maybe high-powered blenders and blend them together, and then you kind of coat them in some coconut. So something that's kind of fun, holiday-ish. I would actually say that because of that little coconut coating, it looks kind of snowy or wintry in my opinion. So it might be something else that you'd want to provide for guests if you're entertaining, or just for yourself. I am a snacker, so I'm always looking for fun snack ideas. And I also came across these crispy barbecue ranch chickpeas. If you remember, chickpeas or legumes are rich in magnesium. They're also a good source of that vitamin B6. Not like this is a pop quiz, anyone needs to remember, but I did stumble across these and I thought that looks really good. I could totally see myself just having a little bowl of those as I watch my TV shows. So giving yourself a little snack with some of those nutrients we talked about. I think, I don't know if we talked about these products last time, and so forgive me if we did. I don't recall, but I want to revisit stress. And when we reach for those donuts, or we reach for those chips, stress is going to happen. But I do want to just mention, having things on hand that, yes, this is not going to cure our problems. This isn't going to make everything dissolve and go away, but I do appreciate how some foods, they can sort of make us feel better. They do provide more nutrients. And then, like I said, they touch on some of those nutrients. So for instance, we already talked about dark chocolate, good source of magnesium, but also dark chocolate is rich in antioxidants. Remember, the darker the cacao, the more basically the more nutrient dense it is, but you can expect to see, or basically experience, a more bitter taste. But some people don't mind it. Our taste buds do adapt. We get used to things. So maybe, you do want to gradually ease your way into some dark chocolate. But I love the fact that, yes, it kind of gives you that, it takes away the chocolate craving. gives you a little more nutrients, and it can bring you a little source of comfort. Those Nature Valley protein bars are some of our favorites because they've got chocolate, they've got some dark chocolate in there. They also have nuts. They're chewy, so it's not necessarily a candy bar, but you know, sometimes it's just a little bit nice to have a little bar that gives you some nutrients and a little sustenance too. Herbal tea, I'm not saying that, you know, when you're feeling stressed that yes, tea is gonna, again, make all your problems go away, but sometimes at the end of the day, if you have had a very stressful day and you're looking to decompress, not going for alcohol or, you know, eating a pint of ice cream, you know, maybe having some tea, chamomile tea, is just what you need. It might just do the trick. We already talked about dates. We talked about bananas as being rich in that tryptophan. So, you know, having them as a snack is totally fine. And if you're not sure how to incorporate dates, I actually put them in my salad. I get chopped dates, and I'm really into like warm winter salad. So I'll heat up some whole grains and I'll put a bed of leafy greens. I'll put some whole grains in there. Might do some protein, like some rotisserie chicken, and then some dates. I'm also a goat cheese person. So all that mixed together is just kind of my take on like a hearty winter salad. So anyway, just one other way that I kind of enjoy, like a little sweet, salty, savory, all in one meal. But there's tons of other ways that you can enjoy it too. All right, so with this next slide, I know we talked about this last time, especially with the sleep, but I still want to talk about it because, you know, our sleep, when we're sleep deprived, obviously that's going to alter our moods. We're cranky, we're irritable. So just kind of a repeat from last time is that, you know, some of these products here have special components that can help improve our sleep and therefore improve our stress. So the tart cherries and the kiwis, they are a rich source of melatonin. If you've heard of that, it's because that's a natural hormone our bodies make just to help regulate our sleep and our wake cycle. So if you're having a hard time sleeping because maybe you're stressed, it might just help to kind of experiment, see if you know, just need a little bit of tart cherry juice or have a kiwi or something like that. I think I mentioned this last time, but there was a study done on participants who averaged about 6 hours of sleep a night. They were given 2 kiwis a day over the course of a month. And by the end of the trial, participants in the study noticed that they increased their average sleep cycle by 1 hour. So I mentioned that they were averaging about 6. Yeah, exactly. So they're averaging about 6 hours of sleep, but after a month of eating 2 kiwis a day, they increased it to 7 hours of sleep. So I think that's pretty cool. And again, there's no direct link. Like, again, all your sleep problems will be assuaged by having kiwis. It's something you can try. And again, it is kind of nice that there's research or there's science that's trying to study or kind of find the connection between the two. All right, so seeing a lot of recurring things here, the nuts. Also, we had talked about, you know, rich in magnesium. They're also a good source of protein and heart healthy fats. So that is going to give you that feeling of satiety. So if you need a little bedtime snack, I always have some nuts on hand just because it's kind of a nice little crunch that I need. It gives you that satisfying feeling where you can kind of drift off to sleep. We love complex carbohydrates on our team. Carbs are not bad. They're all, you know, not all of them are created equally. So we want to get most of our carbs from complex sources. So whole grains, fruits, starchy veggies, even dairy is a complex carbohydrate because it's got the natural milk sugar. So yogurt, cottage cheese, things like that. But all of that is good for us. And so, you know, sometimes having popcorn on hand is a great snack. I'm a Triscuit person. I like those Triscuit crackers. So sometimes I'll just have some crackers and cheese if I need a little bedtime snack. So anyway, there's lots of opportunities out there to mix and match whatever snacks you have out there. But just make sure they're nutrient dense and they're satisfying. They got some protein, they got some fiber. There's our friend cottage cheese. I know a lot of people that don't like cottage cheese. I don't mind it. I know we talked about it, I think, last time, but cottage cheese is another natural source of that tryptophan, which I mentioned that is needed to make serotonin. It also plays a role in producing melatonin. So think about the tonin hormones. You got the serotonin, the melatonin, tryptophan really basically serves as that precursor. So best sources of tryptophan are going to be coming from bananas and dates and asparagus and cottage cheese. All right, and we did also talk about sleepy time tea last time, so I won't spend too much more time on that. So just kind of revisiting that. I know it's a repeat, but it is interesting. Again, stress, sleep, they kind of go hand in hand. But I do want to talk about exercise because this is also a natural stress reducer and it's a mood booster. We've heard of endorphins, and think about the last time when you had a good workout, you probably felt amazing, felt like you could take on the world. You felt super accomplished. So don't forget that exercise is naturally going to enhance our moods. We are in a little bit of a conundrum because it gets dark so early. It's cold outside. We want to stay indoors where it's nice and warm. The recommendations are 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, which can be really hard. So if you can't dedicate a full half hour, you can always break it down into 10-minute intervals. 10 minutes in the morning of something, 10 minutes in the afternoon, 10 minutes in the evening. There's your 30. If anything, I tell people just get moving when you can. If it's a Saturday and you're out running your errands, see if you can park at the furthest spot of the parking lot, take the steps when you can. You can take advantage of this cold weather and go, if you don't mind the crowds, you can go to a mall and, not only shop, but you can kind of use that as a way to get in more steps. There's all kinds of ways to get a little creative. Some of my team members, they're really into fitness apps and YouTube channels, all of that you can do indoors. So movement matters, just trying to get it in when you can. And it also gives you an opportunity to clear your mind. So, think about that stress. If you just need a moment to just kind of process, or, I need those moments. If I have a crazy day, sometimes I just need a good half hour where it's like, hey, it's just me time. So maybe you want to go on a walk, or maybe you want to do something that kind of, makes you decompress a little bit before, things get a little too chaotic. You could also try getting that sunlight. Again, that's a little bit tricky during the winter months, but if you can, we had a couple nice days. I think that week of the last week where I think it got up to mid 60s. I don't know. I was in Pennsylvania last week, but nonetheless, it still got up pretty warm in Pennsylvania. So that was a good day to just get out, get a little bit of sun, just get some fresh air. So take advantage of some of these one-off warm days that we do have in the winter months. Also, don't forget to hydrate. Sorry, waiting for the next slide to transition. Oh, there we go. Don't forget to hydrate because studies show that even just a mild dehydration can alter our moods, make us feel a little more grouchy, a little more irritable, which is really interesting. I don't know the scientific connection between that, but there is that link. So if hydration is a weak spot for you, especially during the winter months, try to find ways that you can stay hydrated. I know for me, it's a little bit harder because I'm cold often. So drinking ice cold water is not really my thing. I am more inclined to drink coffee instead. But, with that, sometimes you can run that risk of dehydration. It is a diuretic. So just be aware of that. So some recommendations I have for people, if you know that hydration isn't really a good, something that you could be a little bit better on, you can always try carrying something with you wherever you go. I know I have this little visual here. I know I said I didn't like my water ice cold, but this canteen does kind of keep my water nice and cold. Even if the ice has melted, it's still cool. And I do like that. Some of those insulated containers can just help make your beverage nice and cold. Some people need their water room temperature. Some people like their water hot. They want to sip hot tea all day. That's completely fine. Other people, they need to jazz it up. They need to throw in some lime, throw in some lemon. You can also do stuff with herbs like basil. So anyway, just try to play around with water and incite, or basically give you an incentive to want to drink. So some people have, they buy a cute little container and that kind of incentivizes their desire to drink. They flavor it, that incentivizes. So find something that increases your desire to want to drink throughout the day and stay on top of it, because when our brain, or basically when we feel thirst, that's usually when people say, oh yeah, I haven't had water, it's time for me to drink. But you're already there, you're already dehydrated. That's your brain telling you, hey, it's been a minute, I need to drink something. So don't wait for your thirst to kick in and tell you to start drinking, because you're already dehydrated. So stay on top of it, just start sipping throughout the day, try to stay on top of it. But yes, it is cool that, having adequate hydration can help with the moods. Yes, Darren, did you have a question?
Yeah. I was going to say, like, for me, I usually start to feel lethargic if I'm dehydrated, and then that feeling could lead to feeling bombed out. And you're trying to
Yes.
figure out, why do I feel so, quote unquote, depressed? When in
Yeah.
reality, you just, you need some water.
For sure. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that you feel like that you're right. It's like you feel that fatigue, which can then make you feel kind of down. You're probably wondering, why am I tired? I thought I got enough sleep. I run into that all the time. I'm like, why do I need a nap? I didn't eat. It's like I slept great the night before, and then it's like I haven't had any water. So that's really interesting that you notice that in your life, Darren. So thanks for sharing that. All right, so just to kind of, revisit, lifestyle factors also influence our mood. We just talked about sleep. So make sure that you are getting adequate sleep. The recommendations are 7 to 9 hours each night. Some people thrive on less and they're totally fine. Some people need, an exact 8.5 hours. I know one friend, she's like, no, I need 8.5 hours exactly, which is funny. And I know for me, I'm just happy if I get 7, because I
Me too.
sometimes do have a hard time. Yeah, I know. But yeah, I'm happy just getting, good amount of, whatever the minimum recommendation is. Stress reduction, also something that, is going to help us with our moods. So just try to find something that helps manage stress and doesn't revolve around food. I'd mentioned this earlier that we don't want to eat our feelings, but every now and then a little self-care is good for the soul, it's good for the body. So, this time of year, take a bubble bath, treat yourself to a spa day, get your nails done, get a pedicure, maybe go to the movies with a friend. Find something that makes you feel good, helps kind of alleviate that stress, but it's productive, and not counterproductive. And then our dietary choices, we did talk about that as well. Making sure we're filling up our plate with the right kinds of foods. I think we've covered that enough. All right, so that's pretty much all. And I want to go to the kitchen. So I'm waiting for this slide to transition. Um, and then, yeah, sorry. Let me skip over. It just basically, I have a slide on the My Plate, which we've covered that already. Actually, let me just briefly recap. So I know I talked about all these nutrients today, the tryptophan, magnesium, the folate, the B6, all that good stuff. So just in summary, the My Plate recommendations are, sorry, I think it's, I switched slides too fast. I'm waiting for everything to kind of catch up on the My Plate slide. So anyway, I was just going to say that, here we go. All right, so when you can, follow the My Plate, and that's just half plate produce. And remember, fresh, frozen, and canned, all forms fit. So if you like fresh, that's great, but I tend to fall into frozen and canned as well, just because, I don't like to race against the clock to make sure that I use my fresh produce. But yeah, there are some things that I just prefer that are fresh and not canned or frozen. So anyway, all of them fit. They all provide almost equal nutritional value. Just make sure with the canned varieties you're choosing low salt or no sodium added, or you can always double rinse to leach out some of that sodium. Quarter plate whole grains, make sure your grains are whole, or as much as you can. Dietary guidelines say make half your grains whole, just because they are superior in their nutrient composition. They have more fiber, they have more B vitamins, they have other phytochemicals. So whole grains are important. So think about whole wheat bread, brown rice, whole wheat pasta, things like that. And then protein, also very important. It doesn't always mean meat, but if you are plant forward, or maybe you're trying to put more plants on your plate, which is a recommendation coming from dietary guidelines and the American Heart Association. You get lots of protein from, poultry, even lean cuts of beef, fish, nuts, seeds, legumes, nut butters, and even dairy is considered a source of lean protein. Even if it's coming from the plant-based sources, some of it still yields a little bit of protein. But think about low-fat cottage cheese and the yogurt, low-fat cheese, like we were talking about, milk products. All right, so that brings me to my last slide. If you are looking for additional resources, I did talk a lot about the Savory online database. You can still find that if you go to giantfood.com/nutrition, but you can meet our team, connect with the nutritionist. You can sign up for other classes that we have. January is going to be an interesting one because we're launching a brand new class called Health at Every Size, or HAZE. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but that's a growing movement now because there's a lot of weight stigma and a lot of judgment around people who might have a higher BMI, or they might not be as thin, quote unquote, as what society would render healthy. And that's very discouraging because some people have great labs, they have great, lifestyles, they exercise, they eat right, but sometimes their BMI is not placing them in a category that would render them healthy. but that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't. So I think that this is a really interesting topic, and I do encourage, if that's something that interests you, you can definitely register. The class is open now, but it's kind of it's more of a mentality. So it's not a diet, it's not like a meal plan. It's really, well, what is health at every size? What does that look like? Why is this something that's catching on? And I think it's cool. It's a really cool topic. Kind of falls in line with, our program, and, us being dietitians, that, healthy looks different for everybody. So it's not a one size fits all approach. So anyway, just want to talk about the upcoming classes that we have. We are also on Facebook. I think everybody knows that by now. And then we also have our Nutrition Made Easy podcast. So that is all that I have. Oh yeah, that is all for my presentation. I am going to stop sharing, but we have a few more minutes. Does anyone have questions or any feedback? I have definitely appreciated the engagement. Oh, yes, Shelly, did you have a question?
I do. The recipes of the items that you mentioned, like the salmon burger, the walnut truffles, and the crispy barbecue ranch chickpeas, is that all found at giantfood.com nutrition?
It's found under the savory tab, but I actually prefer, I'm going to throw it in the chat box. Oh goodness, sorry, recipe center. Let me just double check. There we go. That should be the website. Let me double check here. I'm just going to pull up recipe center. So yes, there's two ways of going about it. You could go to giantfood.com. Oh yeah, there we go. That's the website. So it is recipecenter.giantfood.com. And yeah, let me just put it right here. There we go. That's the better link. So I just put it in the chat. But yeah, that's usually my direct, go. It takes me right there, and in the search engine, I can just type whatever, any kind of ingredient that I want.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. The other thing I just thought of, I don't know if you or somebody else had asked last time I was here to talk about foods that can help with menopause, in light of this, with mood boosting foods. And I did do some research. I will say there's not a whole lot of strong evidence out there. There's some food items that was that you, Shelly, or was that somebody else in the group?
No, it was somebody else.
No, it wasn't me.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It was Mitchell.
No, okay. I will say I did my homework, but I couldn't find a whole lot of research on it. I mean, like, there's some, you have to dig, but I didn't have anything that was like, oh, eat this and it'll help. And so anyway, I just wanted to follow up with that. I know she's not here, but I did look into it. Some of the foods that we had talked about, like the leafy greens, soy, trying to think what else, salmon, the omega-3s, those were also mentioned as this might help with alleviating symptoms of menopause. But we were talking about moods, so it's kind of like, hey, it has a dual purpose, could help with, a number of things, which is good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And my, I guess, input or comment might be is, I know you alluded to it when you got to the My Plate, but I think for people to be conscious of the portions, the amount of food that they eat. Because I think even the good food, I know at least for me, when I overeat, I feel heavy. Again, I feel lethargic. You don't want to do anything. And that leads to your emotions like, oh, again, one thing leads to another. So overeating, even good stuff, could be a problem.
That's a very good point. And the key thing, I forgot to mention this on the slide, but you're right to your point, Darren, that portion sizes matter. And so the plate serves as that guide to fill your plate up with the right foods with the right amount, because most of what you're getting is going to be fiber, because you think about all the produce, the fruits and veggies, as well as those whole grains, and then protein. So those two things work to give you that feeling of satiety. But I do think it's interesting you pointed out that, when we feel like we've blown it or we didn't make the right choices, that can also make us feel bad about ourselves, therefore hindering our mood. So you're right, it kind of becomes this vicious cycle. So, but one thing I take comfort in is that there's always another meal. We're always going to eat again. So it's always another opportunity to maybe do better. So yeah, I just tell people, Yeah, but I think you're right. My plate serves as that guide for how much you should serve yourself and what amount. Is kind of colorful, so you kind of remember the colors and where they go. So, but portion sizes do matter. So, yeah. Well, it is 7:01, and
Yes.
I appreciate you guys being so flexible with my schedule. I usually, don't have any evening commitments, but tonight's a little bit of a different one. But I appreciate you being so respectful of my time and everything. So, but yeah, if you have any questions, I know you have my email, but let me put it in the chat here, just in case anything comes up during the week. But yeah, you can definitely email me. And yeah, I'm happy to answer your questions. But these sessions are always really great. I have a great time chatting with you, and appreciate you giving up your evening for me.
We appreciate
Thank you.
so much,
Yeah,
Kristen.
yeah,
It's one
yeah.
of you guys.
Well,
Mhm.
yeah,
I hope you will return next year.
most definitely. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, for
awesome.
sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll chat about, planning for 2022 programming. But I hope everyone has a very safe and healthy new year. Goodness gracious, we got to stay healthy. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So,
All
but
right.
I hope everyone stays well, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank
Okay.
you
See
too.
you again. All
Okay,
right.
all right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Darren. Bye, Shelley.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Shelley?
Darren, I'm gonna give you a call later.
Okay.
I gotta go call my parents.
Okie dokie.
Bye.
All right. Talk to you later.